look at this shot of Dr. Doom as the one above all. It looks pretty dope, right? Okay, so this is a story called Avengers Children's Crusade. And I know people who are longtime fans of the channel are like, finally, because we've never covered this story on the channel before. But Children's Crusade gives us both Dr. Doom at his most powerful, even more powerful than when he was Emperor Doom during Secret Wars 2015, and you'll see what I'm talking about. But it also gives us a massive change involving the Scarlet Witch and everything that's gone on. So I figured now would be a good time to do it with Avengers Doomsday and all that kind of stuff going on. So what this initially does is this opens up with the young Avengers facing off against the Sons of the Serpent. We don't have to go into that. It's whatever, it doesn't really matter. What matters with this is that in the midst of the fight, by the time the Avengers show up on the scene to deal with the threat, Wiccan, right, Billy Kaplan, the son of Scarlet Witch, manifests his powers. Now he's already had them up to this point in time, but he uses his powers and takes out all the Sons of the Serpent in one fell swoop. Now, one of the things to know about Billy and the Young Avengers is that you have Billy, Tommy, and the rest of the Young Avengers team. They came together in the aftermath of the Avengers basically disbanding, right? Avengers disassembled. In their mind, somebody had to pick up the slack. By the time the new Avengers came onto the scene, things were a little tenuous, but the idea was, hey, let them do their thing. We'll keep an eye on them, make sure they don't get into too much trouble, which was largely kind of what happened up to this point in time. The Avengers involving themselves here is because their concern is that Wiccan will become the new Scarlet Witch. Now, Billy doesn't fully understand the history of Wanda, and that's one of the things to know about Billy and Tommy at this point in time. They have suspicions that they're the children of Scarlet Witch, but they don't definitively know. In fact, really, Wiccan is the one who believes more than Tommy, also known as Speed. But effectively, they get a kind of rehash of what went on with the Scarlet Witch, which is to say, when they're filled in, they're told the Scarlet Witch has the power to alter reality, which makes her the most powerful and dangerous entity in the known universe. She blamed the Avengers for the loss of her sons and lashed out at us, losing control of her powers and causing the deaths of the original Vision, Hawkeye, and Cassie's dad, Ant-Man. Her father, Magneto, and her brother Quicksilver took her to the island of Genosha to help her recover. But fearing for his sister's safety, Quicksilver persuaded Wanda to use her powers to transform the world into one where Magneto and his family reigned supreme. Now, this is all basically Avengers Disassembled and the prelude to House of M. House of M kicks off when that new reality is created by Wanda, and they continue on, right, until those of us who were able to remember our former lives fought to reclaim those former lives. And so, devastated by the bloodshed by her family in the name of mutant kind, the Scarlet Witch cast one last spell: no more mutants, robbing over 1 million mutants of their powers and consider what some might consider to be mutant genocide. And that's where Wiccan says, and you think I might have power like that. Now, it's a very important thing because he says, because you believe Tommy and I really are the sons of the Scarlet Witch. And Tommy's kind of dismissive of it, right? But Billy says, Tommy has doubts, but how else do you explain a speedster and a witch named Thomas and William who could be twins? So again, they don't definitively know, they just largely suspect it. But things kind of continue on with this idea that Billy doesn't necessarily believe that Wanda would have done such a thing. But the Avengers tell him, like, it was 100% her. Wanda absolutely did this. And Carol Danvers, who at this point is just Miss Marvel, even goes so far as to say, right, the Scarlet Witch was a murderer. So a lot of people look at her with a villainous eye. And that's going to be a very important thing going forward, because what ends up happening is the Young Avengers basically come together. And the idea is, we have to get to the bottom of this. The Avengers are never going to give Wanda the benefit of the doubt. And if she really is our mother, then we owe it to her, at least on some level, to find out what really happened. Was Wanda really behind the events of House of M? Or was there something else going on? And so in that moment, when the Young Avengers are meeting, they're met by the arrival of Magneto. And Magneto, of course, being the father of Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, at this point in Marvel Comics, because sometimes he is, sometimes he's not, it depends on what story Marvel wants to tell and what the Marvel Cinematic Universe is essentially doing, Magneto kind of pulls them aside and starts talking to Billy and Tommy and sort of explains everything that goes on. Now, it is important to know there is a bit of a battle and a scuffle that goes on here, because the Avengers do show up here. And in fact, the Avengers try to subdue both Magneto and the Young Avengers. But ultimately, because of Wiccan, they're all able to essentially teleport out and escape the Avengers. But this is going to be kind of the mainstay. The Avengers are actually going to be chasing after them for a little while. What matters here is that Magneto essentially brings them to Wundagore Mountain, right? The birthplace of the Scarlet Witch. He does give them a little bit of history there, insofar as his former wife Magda was pregnant with Wanda and Pietro, right, Quicksilver, and that Magneto didn't know, and that in the old classic X-Men stories, basically introducing the origin of Magneto, where it didn't really exist the way that it was told in classic X-Men, that when his first daughter, Anya, which a lot of people don't know that he had, when his original daughter, Anya, with Magda, had been burned to death by villagers who discovered that Magneto basically had powers, he lashed out, killed everybody in the village, and Magda took off, and then eventually gave birth to Quicksilver and Wanda within Wundagore Mountain. So you do get that little bit of a history there. What's important about this is that Quicksilver catches up to them. Now, from Quicksilver's perspective, he's trying to get Billy and Tommy out of the influence of Magneto, because in his mind, no matter what Magneto says, he's going to try to use them for his own nefarious purposes. And even Quicksilver goes so far as to say, look, like, I don't know where Wanda is, but the reality here is that if you cannot find Wanda, it's because Wanda doesn't want to be found. Here's the irony behind it all. In the epilogue for House of M, right, the very ending of the story, and a lot of you guys are probably thinking about this at the beginning of this, Wanda does show up. Right, she actually shows up in Transia. She's just kind of walking around, just sort of enjoying things, seemingly not having any concern about the fact that she wiped out 98% of the mutant population. Within this locale, Wanda's here, but what Marvel does is they come back and they change things, that instead of saying this is actually Wanda, it turns out to be a Doom bot. And that's where the statement is made. No wonder no one's been able to find the Scarlet Witch. She's the prisoner of Dr. Doom. But this is only one part of the equation, because something to also kind of keep in mind here is that in a lot of ways, Billy and Tommy are kind of learning about the superhero landscape for the first time. And so they don't really know much about Victor Von Doom. They know of him as much as anybody knows of Victor Von Doom. But Magneto essentially kind of gives them a run over, right? Like, Dr. Doom is no one to be trifled with. Dr. Doom is one of the most powerful practitioners of sorcery in the world. When you combine that with his knowledge of technology and his thirst for power, Dr. Doom is arguably the most dangerous villain in the entirety of the Marvel Universe. But at the end of the day, the Young Avengers are steadfast, and Wiccan and Tommy are looking to find the Scarlet Witch. And so when their journey eventually leaves Quicksilver behind, what we do here for a brief moment is we switch over to the Avengers. Now, one of the things to know is this is the new Avengers roster, which is almost kind of like a Unity squad, but not really. Wolverine is really the only mutant on the new Avengers team. But with Wolverine kind of knowing about the idea that Wiccan's out there and knowing that Wiccan and them are going to be hunting for the Scarlet Witch, unlike the rest of the Avengers, specifically Simon Williams, right, who's just kind of like, we need to capture her, we need to bring her here, and we need to figure out what to do with her, right, hold her prisoner or whatever the case happens to be. Wolverine is like, nope, we kill her. That's exactly what we're going to do, right? He even says that the Scarlet Witch murdered our friends. She stole our lives, and then she took out about 1 million mutants, and not one of you can tell me that she won't do something like that or worse again. So the only permanent solution is to kill her. And if we're smart, we'll get rid of the Wiccan kid too. It's pretty extreme, right? But the reason why this whole segment matters is because with Wolverine getting the upper hand on Captain America, right? Because Steve Rogers tries to step in, and Wolverine just kind of helps Steve understand his place in the bigger picture, that Wolverine realizes he has to get the X-Men. So Wolverine effectively leaves and goes to find the X-Men himself. So now the X-Men are going to be on the hunt for Scarlet Witch. Because keep in mind, in the aftermath of House of M, Wanda is public enemy number 1. The X-Men do not care. The only thing that matters to them is that Wanda suffer and die for what she did to the mutant population. And so in the midst of all of this, and the reason why Quicksilver, for example, gets left behind, is because Billy just takes off to Castle Doom by himself. He leaves everybody behind. But when he shows up there, Wanda doesn't know who he is. It's kind of interesting because when he initially appears, he actually takes on the form of Wanda, right? Because he realizes, okay, if Wanda is a prisoner of Dr. Doom, then most likely Wanda has at least some measure of being able to walk around, or at least they know what she looks like. So if I make myself look like her, I can kind of walk around the place with a little more freedom than I would if I just showed up as myself. They would immediately attack me, right? And so when he shows up here, Wanda is waiting for him. And she says, "Who are you and what are you doing in my room?" And that's where Billy kind of mulls over a couple things, right? Like, I'm your son, like I'm the son that you thought was dead, but whose soul migrated into the body of a gay Jewish fanboy. I'm an idiot, right? All these small little things where he's trying to figure out what to say to her. But at the end of the day, all he really says is, "I'm here to rescue you from Dr. Doom." And Wanda's just kind of like, I mean, why would you intend to do that? And he just says, right, in spite of the fact that you just threw me on the ground and pinned me there with your 3-inch heel, I'm actually kind of a superhero, right, in training. But I have powers and everything, magic powers, right? This is one of these funny little encounters between the two. But the reality is that Wanda doesn't necessarily want to go. And the reason why is because she's marrying Dr. Doom. And in fact, in this conversation between Wiccan and Wanda, Doom shows up here. And so when that happens, it's just kind of like, okay, like Doom immediately attacks Wiccan. Now, for his part, Billy's able to hold his own, which is no small thing. And given how powerful he becomes in Marvel, it makes perfect sense. This kid's like the Gohan of the Young Avengers, right? Like every once in a while in the early days, you see these crazy small bursts of power. And then suddenly all this power gets unlocked one day and he's just cracked. So to kind of give you a little context about the nature of his character. But the whole idea behind Billy is the only reason Wanda's here is because Victor put her under some kind of spell. She's not here of her own accord and of her own volition. And so what's kind of wild is that while Billy is holding off the power of Victor Von Doom, Doom is talking about how he's trying to like protect everybody, right? Protect Wanda, protect himself, protect the world. And Billy keeps talking to Wanda about who she used to be, that she married the Vision, different things like that. Doom tells Wanda that's nonsense, right? You can't listen to him. Nothing that he's saying makes any sense. But ultimately he subdues Billy, right? He subdues Wiccan because Wiccan just really isn't experienced enough to be able to hold his own against someone like Victor. And so Wanda, in seeing this, just says, right, he's a boy. He had no intention of harming me. And that's where Doom says, "You are too trusting, my love, even of me. Tomorrow you marry the king of Latveria, a man with more enemies than allies, all of whom will become your enemies. So please hear me when I tell you it is not too late to reconsider." And that's where Wanda just says, if you have enemies, it is because they do not know you as I do. You saved me, Victor. You keep saving me. And after the wedding tomorrow, nothing and no one will ever come between us. Now, because of the fact that Billy left a note behind for Hulkling, basically the Young Avengers were able to find him, right? They were able to figure out, okay, cool, he went to Latveria. Let's go find this guy. But the Avengers are not far behind because they figure out pretty quickly that's exactly where the Young Avengers are going as well. And that's when you kind of start getting these little tidbits, right? Bits and pieces coming together because Billy starts getting an explanation of what's happening. Because Billy tells Victor, he says, "You're about to marry a woman with the powers of a god." And Victor just says, her powers are gone. Her mind seems to have repressed her memory and her magic to heal itself. And that's where Billy's like, then how did you even find her, right? And Victor just says, "I didn't. She found me. She came asking for my help, petitioning me on behalf of her people. And in spite of my reluctance to aid a former enemy, I found it impossible to refuse her." And he says, given my history, even I find it difficult to believe that he is actually in love with Wanda, because Victor really does seem to be. But what you also end up finding out here, where he was able to apply a kind of restorative spell to Wiccan in order to restore him after almost killing him in his assault, what he's also done is stripped Wiccan of his powers. So now Billy's powerless. And so this leads to Magneto and the Young Avengers, alongside the Avengers themselves, showing up to Latveria and seemingly launching an attack with Quicksilver not far behind. And so for the most part, while Billy's just kind of trying to figure out what's going on, blissfully unaware of the fact that pretty much the entirety of the superhero community, outside of the X-Men and the Fantastic Four, are coming to this place, Wanda shows up to him and she says, it's all been perfect, meeting Victor, falling in love, the king proposing to the gypsy girl, but it's all been too perfect until you showed up and Victor suddenly became someone I didn't recognize. So before I walk down the aisle with him, I need you to tell me everything. Tell me about this Scarlet Witch. And that's where Wiccan just says, on one condition, you have to get me out of here. And so Wanda does that, and that's when he kind of starts filling her in on the history that he's aware of, both from his own kind of research into Wanda, as well as what he was told by the Avengers. And he says, the Scarlet Witch was one of the most powerful members of the team of heroes called the Avengers. She fell in love with and married another Avenger, the Vision, with whom she had twin boys, Thomas and William. From what I've heard, they were a happy family until the twin souls were captured by a criminal named Master Pandemonium for his master, the demon Mephisto. But the Scarlet Witch blamed the Avengers for the loss of her kids and killed 3 of her teammates, destroying the team, or so it seemed, until a young hero called Iron Lad began recruiting a new generation of Avengers, a group of kids with personal connections to the Avengers, even if those connections were not immediately apparent. In fact, it wasn't until I met a speedster named Thomas who looked just like me that I realized I'm an idiot. And she's like, what are you talking about? And like once they get outside, Dr. Doom is fighting the Avengers and the Young Avengers along with a whole host of sentries. But let's backtrack for a second, right? Let's talk about that idea of Wanda's kids, because I think people still might be a little fuzzy on that. So we're going to clear this up in like 45 seconds. The idea behind this is that in Marvel Comics, there came a point where Mephisto was basically killed by Franklin Richards as a baby, literally destroyed. The pieces of Mephisto's soul scattered to the 4 winds. Wanda subconsciously took 2 of those pieces and turned them into Billy and Tommy. That's how her and an android were able to have kids. Eventually, it's discovered through the storyline with Master Pandemonium, they are the pieces of Mephisto's soul. So Pandemonium showing up on behalf of Mephisto makes this revelation to Wanda, and then basically Billy and Tommy are, for lack of a better word, destroyed, right? Those 2 pieces of Mephisto's soul return to his body, and he is whole again. Wanda has a breakdown, and so Agatha Harkness uses her powers to wipe Wanda's memories of all knowledge of her ever having kids in the first place. And it went on that way for years in Marvel Comics, until Avengers Disassembled, when Wanda remembers that she has kids, but she doesn't remember what happened to them, and she's convinced the Avengers did something to them. And so that's how the events of Avengers Disassembled unfold. So, jumping back to this, may have been a little bit longer than 45 seconds, Wolverine shows up on the scene in an effort to kill Wanda. But in the midst of all of this, Iron Lad appears, because Iron Lad has an idea on how to solve this massive problem. Now, for those of you guys who are unfamiliar about Iron Lad, right, here's a really, really cool, quick and dirty, hopefully another 45-second explanation on the nature of Iron Lad. So, in Marvel Comics, you're familiar with Kang the Conqueror, right? From the 30th, 31st century, he's always trying to conquer the universe by going back into the past and changing things. The idea behind Iron Lad is that Kang the Conqueror, understanding time the way he does, knows that anything could happen along the time stream, and that somewhere along the line in the time stream, an event could transpire in such a way to where he doesn't become Kang, and basically his existence disappears. And so what he did is he went back into the past and basically tried to make sure that his teenage self did everything that he needed to do to ensure that he became Kang. His teenage self wanted to rebel against it. But the reality here is that Iron Lad, trying to stop himself from becoming Kang the Conqueror, it's you standing on the beach with a 1,000-foot tidal wave barreling towards you, wearing boxing gloves, right? Good luck, my friend. You're not stopping anything. And so that's how it works with Iron Lad. He will become Kang the Conqueror. It's just whenever you see him, he just hasn't become Kang yet. And so the idea here, right, when Wiccan and Wanda kind of use the momentary distraction of Dr. Doom and Magneto facing off against each other to effectively bail out and meet up with the rest of the Young Avengers, that Iron Lad's plan is to go back into the past and to basically stop the detonation of Jack of Hearts. Jack of Hearts basically being a former superhero who had died and then been resurrected by Wanda in the events of Avengers Disassembled, and then blew up Avengers Mansion, given the fact that Jack of Hearts has so much power. The idea behind this was that by preventing that, it would stop Avengers Disassembled, which in turn would stop House of M, right? Preventing a chain reaction of events from taking place, and basically making it so that Wanda is never going to be an enemy of anybody. And so this is one of those instances where Iron Lad uses time to try to perform good deeds, and to a degree it works, but at the same time, it doesn't. But there are a couple of really cool moments that go on here. For example, because Scott Lang was killed during the events of Avengers Disassembled, Cassie never really got to have a long-term meaningful relationship with her father. And so in seeing Scott Lang here, the main priority she has is trying to figure out a way to save him. So when Jack of Hearts shows up here, they start to realize, number one, because he's already here, there's no way to stop the chain of events from happening. But the second thing here is that Cassie grabs Scott Lang and the two of them go running. So that right there is a change to the time stream that's not supposed to happen. Wanda does approach Jack of Hearts, and that's when all the memories kind of start kicking back in for Wanda, when she starts to regain her past. Because Iron Lad, of course, brings everybody back to the present day and realizing that they couldn't go that route of stopping the events of Avengers Disassembled and House of M from happening, so they have to figure out something else. But when that happens, when they show back up in the present day, Wanda remembers everything. She recalls everything now, right? Her whole past, essentially. And in fact, she talks about her actions. She says, I wanted the Avengers to experience loss. That's why I took my revenge on them. I wanted them to face the sins of their past the way that I had to face mine. So I confronted them with their failures, their addictions, their mistakes. A fleet of Kree warships seeking vengeance for the Kree-Shi'ar War, and an army of Ultron robots. But the reality here is that because they're back in the present day and Wanda's here, of course, the Avengers are excited to see Scott Lang to a degree. He's not supposed to be here, but they're kind of like, hey, we're glad you're here. But it's also Wanda in the sky, right? Just manifesting all kinds of crazy power. So as you can imagine, the Avengers start freaking out. They're kind of like, okay, we need to figure out what to do here. But the reality is that they realize Wanda's not here to attack anybody. The problem with this, though, is that Wanda doesn't seem to be in control of herself. In fact, Wiccan picks up on it, and Wanda herself says that, right? Don't come any closer, please. Right, my friends, my husband, my children, all dead because of me. She's just kind of caught up in the guilt of the moment, but there is something else that is going on. But the memories flooding back to her, it kind of forces her to confront the fact she killed so many people that she knew and loved. But the big thing that comes out of this, at least in this moment, is Billy approaching her and saying, we are your children. I am your son. Tommy is your son. So it's Wanda meeting her sons for the very first time and realizing who they actually are. But this is where things start to get cool, because initially Wanda tries to atone for her past misdeeds. I know you're probably asking yourself, when does Dr. Doom become the one above all? Bear with me here. Wanda does try to atone for her past misdeeds, the idea of stripping the mutant population of their powers. And so what she ends up doing is, alongside Jessica Jones, they travel to go meet basically X-Factor investigations. Jamie Madrox. What had basically happened after House of M is that Jamie Madrox and those guys, basically they launched X-Factor as an investigative, mutant type of organization. What's important here is that Wanda restores the powers of Richter. And when that happens, it basically illustrates Wanda can start bringing people's powers back. The problem is that the X-Men arrive on the scene, because now the question becomes, what's Wanda going to do? Right now that she can start restoring people's powers, can she do it on a large scale? Now, with the Avengers showing up here at the same time the X-Men are here, these guys are not the best of friends. A lot of it is because of the fact that the X-Men have kind of become a little more, I don't know if I would say like extremists. Cyclops certainly has, right? This is during the era of Cyclops and Marvel, when he's basically becoming more and more of a villain. He's becoming more and more extreme, which will eventually lead into him killing Xavier during Avengers versus X-Men. But basically, it's both groups looking to capture Wanda for two different reasons. The Avengers want to bring her in, right? Basically take her prisoner and likely hand her over to the authorities for her actions, or however it is that the Avengers would handle that. And the X-Men want to kill her. But with Wanda now having the ability to restore people's powers, it changes the way everybody sees everything. Because now the X-Men are just kind of like, okay, she's coming with us, but we're not going to kill her yet, right? She's going to restore everybody's powers, and then we'll kill her, right? So like her days are numbered as far as the X-Men are concerned. So you do get a bit of a conflict between the Avengers, the X-Men, and Magneto, while Magneto is trying to protect Wanda from both the Avengers and the X-Men. Emma Frost does step in, try to use her telepathy to manipulate the minds of Billy and Tommy, but Wanda, kind of having enough of it, basically goes through to every single person who's here and shuts their mind down, which basically just kind of knocks them out for a moment, but it gives Wanda and the Young Avengers enough time to jump back to Castle Doom. And this is when the one above all element starts to come into play. Because what ends up happening is Wanda is like, Castle Doom is the only real safe place here. More so than that, there's a lot happening and going on that Wanda is starting to remember that no one else knows except for her and for Dr. Doom. Because what Wanda says is that Dr. Doom was a part of everything that had happened as far as her attaining such an extreme level of power. And this is kind of the retcon that's a bit controversial depending on who you're talking to. Because what Wanda says is when she says she remembers everything, she says, when I learned of my son's deaths, I became desperate and sought Victor's help in bringing them back to life. He was my enemy, but his magics were more powerful than mine or Doctor Strange's, and he was certainly less conflicted when it came to practicing the darker arts. And to my surprise, he agreed to help me. And Doom says, since Wanda is a nexus being, a living focal point for Earth's mystical energies, we were able to combine our magics to access and capture the life force itself, the only power that could give her back her sons. And Wanda says, we were naive to think the life force could be so easily contained and manipulated. And Doom says it possessed Wanda and transformed her into an entity with the reality-shaping abilities of a god. The forces we unleashed that day could not be controlled and resulted in the crimes that you described, Wiccan. It was not until months later that my scouts found Wanda living in Transia with no memory of what she was or what she had done. But the reason why this retcon is so controversial is because during the events of Avengers Disassembled, there was no clear indication as to how it was that Wanda had remembered that she had sons. She just remembered that she had them. She had killed Agatha Harkness, she attacked the Avengers, and then of course things unfolded and escalated from there. More so than that, Wanda suddenly having the ability to alter reality on a universal scale was one part chaos magic, but it was also just kind of presented to us as the logical conclusion of the nature of Wanda's powers, that instead of her simply just bending probability to her favor and casting her hexes, she was quite literally altering reality on a universal scale. She just didn't realize that's what she was doing. And it went on that way for years and years and years and years. What this does is it comes back and provides an explanation for how she was even able to do that at all. But Wanda being here with Dr. Doom and with Billy being here, Wanda's idea is that she can make up for the events of House of M by using the life force to restore all the powers of everyone who lost them as a result of her spell. She had the life force when she cast it. She doesn't have the life force anymore. If she can get it back, she can set everything back to rights. Now, as you can probably imagine, life doesn't work that way. If the life force was far too powerful for Wanda to control during the events of Avengers Disassembled and House of M, what reason is there to believe that she could even control it now? But the attempt is made, because it's better to try that and fail than to not give it any kind of a meaningful shot at all. And so when Dr. Doom, Wanda, and Wiccan basically cast this spell together, it is technically interrupted by Patriot, who doesn't really know what he's doing, but he believes that he's like saving Wiccan from getting caught up in all this madness. But the entirety of the life force is channeled by Dr. Doom. And when that happens, he now becomes the one above all. And there's a statement that he makes explicitly to that point, right? He says, Dr. Doom is dead. Victor Von Doom has been reborn, reformed and transformed by the reality-altering power of the life force itself, and by you, Wanda. And he says, I swear to you, I shall not abuse it. I shall devote my life to redressing the wrongs that I have done, to atoning for my sins, and to earning a place for myself among the heroes of this world. So he truly means to be a good guy. But here's the kicker about the life force, and it's one of the aspects of it that's oftentimes glossed over. When Wanda used the power of the life force during Avengers Disassembled and House of M, the effects of House of M, stripping 98% of the mutant population of their powers, that was a multiversal effect. It didn't just affect the main Marvel universe, it affected every reality across the multiverse. And so that's the level of power that we're dealing with here. That's why it was so overwhelming for Wanda. The issue with this is that Wanda and and the Young Avengers don't necessarily side with Victor Von Doom, and they don't really seem to really believe him when he talks about the idea of wanting to redeem himself for all of his past misdeeds. And so what ends up happening is that they're essentially teleported away by Dr. Doom, who says, make up your minds, right? You guys need to decide, are you going to stand with me or against me? Specifically, will Wanda marry Doom? Because in Doom's mind, what they can achieve as this kind of magical power couple is astronomical, right? They could literally rewrite all of creation and reality itself. And so when they're all teleported out, Wanda is initially subdued by Emma Frost. And then Emma Frost starts scanning the mind of Wanda and realizing what's going on here. The problem is that by the time they start to put the pieces together, Dr. Doom shows up. But then he starts to tell them, right? He says, Wanda was trying to save her son's lives when she was possessed by the power of creation itself, the power to make and unmake reality, the power that I now possess. But have no fear, for I intend to use it to heal. And Cyclops asks, right, can you heal the mutant race? And he says, I can do anything, Mr. Summers. I can make the blind see, and he restores Cyclops' eyesight. He says, I can cure the afflicted, and he turns Beast back into his normal human form. And he says, and if need be, I can raise the dead, and seemingly shows the fact that he can bring back everyone who's ever died, all the members of the X-Men, Jean Grey, Captain Marvel, like the original Marvel of the Kree, Banshee, and then he says, or nothing at all. It's up to you. And he just removes it all. He takes Cyclops' eyesight back, he sends Beast back into his furry form, and that's when they're like, so you're talking about surrender, is really what you're talking about. And Doom just says, you may resist if you wish, if your pride demands it, but you will not win. Even the power of the Beyonder was nothing compared to that of the life force, and those who resist it will surely perish. So right off the bat, and that's the caveat that I'm talking about, Dr. Doom is more powerful than the original Beyonder. Keeping in mind, the original pre-retcon Beyonder dwarfed the power of even the Beyonders that we saw in Hickman's Avengers and New Avengers run. And so ultimately he just asks, will you accept my offer? And of course, as you would expect from the Avengers and the X-Men, not a chance. So they all end up basically trying to go and fight Dr. Doom. They don't stand much of a chance at all. And what's kind of ironic about that is that this is one of those moments where Dr. Doom has all this power, but isn't really using it to its fullest potential. Because when this goes down, Cassie Lang actually grows to a gigantic size and goes and punches Doom. Why? Because Doom had attacked Scott Lang and seemingly killed him, right? And she says, you killed my father. And he says, and I can just as easily do the same to you, child. So I suggest you rein in that tantrum of yours before I lose my temper, and blast this girl and sends her flying. But one of the things that goes on here is Wanda, in seeing all of this, tells Wiccan, you need to grab everybody and teleport out of here as fast as you can. We're going to open a portal and you're going to jump. What's interesting about this is that when that goes down, in these moments of a second, right? Because this whole thing, this whole conflict is happening in a matter of minutes, right? This is not some long 1 hour, 2, 3 hour conflict. I mean, we're talking about the span of 5, maybe 10 minutes at most. Dr. Doom immediately starts to be overcome by the life force. He says, by opening that portal, you've only given me more power, more illumination, more white light flooding my soul, making my mind one with the creators, burning away my sins, my imperfections. And then suddenly, all that power dissipates. It's more than he can handle, and it's more than he can control. Because Wanda says, let it go, Victor, it's killing you. And he says, I will not be corrupted. I am not weak like you. And that's where things get kind of nuts, because Wanda goes to tend to Victor, right? And Victor just says, get away from me, woman. He says, you are nothing, a nexus creature, a conduit to power. That's all you are, and that's all you have ever been. He says, you think you were powerful enough to destroy the Avengers and rid the world of its mutants? That was me. That was Doom the entire time. So this was another big retcon that came out of the story. It was actually Dr. Doom manipulating Wanda into wiping out the Avengers and wiping out 98% of the mutant population's powers. And so where Wanda, in hearing all of this, just says, right, let me help you, please. The response of Doom, you can't even help yourself. You're as weak and as trusting and as easily led as your so-called friends. I will leave you to them. Perhaps they'll even save me the trouble of having to kill you. And he just teleports away. The problem is that in the aftermath of all of this, Cassie Lang is dead. In fact, she dies in place of Scott Lang. Now, Iron Lad does have the idea of jumping back into the past and saving the life of Cassie Lang. But the reality here is that, again, time is no small thing to mess with. You can't just go jumping back and forth willy-nilly through time, doing whatever it is that you feel like doing. Because as we know from Age of Ultron, time is a living construct. It's a living thing. And where Iron Lad starts to lash out at Vision telling him, you can't go into the past, you can't change things, and he basically destroys the Vision, that's one of the huge kind of unbreakable moments in Iron Lad's history, which moves him ever closer to becoming King the Conqueror. And so it's kind of this bit of a reminder for his character. He is destined to become king. There is no getting around it, and there is no stopping it. And so ultimately, he just jumps back into the time stream. And everyone's just kind of left to deal with the fallout of Cassie Lang's death and the statement of Dr. Doom and saying he was the one that was truly behind everything. And of course, it means that Wanda, being manipulated by the Life Force, wasn't really even in control of herself. But the X-Men don't care. Their whole stance is, okay, cool. So yeah, maybe Wanda wasn't in control of herself. Maybe Dr. Doom was manipulating her the entire time, but at the end of the day, it was her finger on the trigger. She's the one who pulled it. If she's the trigger man, she's the one that's got to go. So at the moment, they're not really hell-bent on killing her, but they do say maybe a better fate for Wanda is to have to spend the rest of her life knowing that every time a mutant sees her, she will see hate in their eyes. That no matter where she goes, she will never have a home in this world. And in fact, that's kind of the statement of the X-Men and the ideology of the X-Men that even leads all the way up to the age of Krakoa, when Wanda was not allowed to come to the island of Krakoa and to join the mutant population. So, with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this to an end. Yes, Children's Crusade is a phenomenal story. It's beautifully written. Jim Cheung's art is absolutely gorgeous. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, drop a like. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.